thinking, yes, we have a Georgia fan on, dot, 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 or something like that. But, are we starting?
Can you tell how professional we are sometimes? Oh, are we starting? Oh, we always strive for perfection. We never come anywhere close.
Nothing but the best.
The Herb and Raj podcast. Herb, that's Raj. Appreciate you guys taking time out. If you're listening live, on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you're listening, or if you're listening to the rebroadcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Apple Music.
What about Threads? Threads is the new thing. Like, what's
Raj,
going on with that?
I logged into Threads and realized I'm probably out of my element.
Yeah, I threaded one thing and that was it. I was like, okay, there's a lot going on here. Let me give this a few days or something.
Yeah, I'll let everyone else figure it out and I'll see how I feel about it. But otherwise, Raj, I don't know.
All right.
So, Raj, we have a very, very special guest.
Yes.
We might just be depressed for the next hour listening to him talk, but we had to break on. We have Randy from a Damn Beast Media, a Georgia fan, and really that really says everything. And you say, you didn't say that until 2 years ago. You didn't even have any hatred for Georgia.
I didn't have hatred because the rivalry was so competitive, especially what happened the previous few years, and then they went back to back on us, and it was just like, So, hey, but it's good. It's good to have that competition in the SEC. So I love it.
No, it's not. I want more like Georgia versus. You know what? We're being rude, Randy.
Yeah, let's introduce Randy. Come on, yeah.
Randy, we appreciate you taking some time out, man.
Yes, thank you so much.
Tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm happy to be here. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Awesome.
I do have the first question, and Mike from Area Tap Podcast. This is where I actually saw Randy was on Mike's show. Asked him to come on, Raj. So, of course, he's already talking good about Randy. Yeah, we know, man. He seems like a good guy. So we don't talk too bad about him. My first question, Randy, is like when you walk around town now, like, do your feet actually even touch the ground, or are you just kind of
just floating
as you go?
Well, I got to tell you, the path is a little softer considering all this high cotton I'm walking in. So I'm not the stroll is not too difficult on the old Tootsies these days. I'll give you that. Seriously, I do not have any issue with how things are going. Like, I am a very solid Generation Xer. So I have had my fill of 8-4 and high expectations only to underachieve, and so to finally see it come together and break through and succeed on a national level. And don't misunderstand me. Georgia, since the year 2000, has averaged 10 wins a season. Okay. But because of what Nick Saban has been doing in Alabama, that door's been really hard to kick down. Yeah. And so the fact that Kirby and the guys have done the work and done the things necessary to put themselves in a position to have a chance to win it and then to actually win it. I mean, that's a big deal, and we are loving life over here. There's no doubt.
Okay,
Raj, did you have the next one, or do you want me to? I wanted to touch on a little bit because you kind of led into my first kind of questions.
Yeah, that's fine.
At the end of the Richt era, were you kind of like, it's time to go? It's been a little bit too much, or where did you stand when that happened? And then transitioning in that question, how did you feel about the Kirby Smart hire looking back when it first happened?
Well, I think those two things absolutely go hand in hand. Just for me individually, I'm someone who was always a big supporter of Coach Richt. I really appreciated everything he did for the university while he was there. But the fact of the matter is that the rest of the program was not in alignment with what Richt needed to do. And so how much of their inability to break through was on him as a coach, and how much of it was on the fact that the support system was not what it needed to be. So I enjoyed Coach Richt being there, but you had to make that choice. Where do you want to be? Do you want to be a program that wins 10 games a year, wins a bowl game, beats your rivals, which is a tremendous college football season? Or Do you want to do what it takes to step into that next level, which means getting the entire football program into alignment, supporting it through donations and, you know, the sort of stuff that you have to do to fundraise, to then have the facilities and so on and so forth. The only person that I would have personally accepted as a replacement for Rick at that point was Kirby Smart, simply because I knew we're the same age. He and I were at the university at the same time. Bobo, right? We were all there together. So we view the world at least the same in that way, right? We lived the same experience of being on campus at that time. And I just believed that if I could see what the university needed to do to take that step, of course, he can see it, right? And he had been at Alabama where he saw the fact that Nick had a yes anytime he had a request. And when Kirby came to Athens, essentially that's what he was guaranteed. He said, I know what to do. You have to commit to doing it. And once they did that, I mean, I was fine for the change, because just as in life, in college football, change is never easy and growth can hurt. It can be difficult. So there is no hard feelings or disrespect to Coach Richt at all.
Definitely.
But to make that next move, something had to change, and Kirby was the person who held the chips, had the leverage to say either change it or I'm not coming. I mean, imagine if he had gone down the road and taken the South Carolina job, which he was looking at that same time. So would they have made those commitments? I don't know. But his heart has always been in Athens, and I'm just really happy with the marriage that they've put together over there. And I mean, at this point, who's going to say that it's going to stop anytime soon?
Yeah. With that, I guess with that, I guess that kind of goes into my first question. Obviously, for anybody who's been living under a rock or doesn't pay attention to college football, Georgia's a two-time defending national champion. So, with that being said,
Reigning.
You're right. Reigning national champion.
You don't defend anything, right? That's last year. So
you're right. They are
reigning.
And reigning.
It's been so long for us that we don't remember how that. You're talking about back in the old days when we used to win. So that's how the typical Alabama thinks. Really.
With that being said, I guess. With that being said, would you consider Georgia football a dynasty right now, or would you think they need to win one more, make it a three-peat, and then would you consider them a dynasty?
They're absolutely not a dynasty.
Okay.
And I think, and see, I don't even like that word, because it's the kind of thing that is just so very subjective. What you think is a dynasty might not be a dynasty to me.
Right.
As I mentioned before, I'm a Generation Xer. So as we broke into the new century, I mean, the things that mattered in college football were happening in Southern California with Pete Carroll and USC. And I just remember thinking, is this ever going to end? And of course it did. There was some, questionable stuff going on in the program.
Yeah.
Pete skedaddled before he got wrapped up in any of it and took off to the NFL and was doing what he's doing. But at the time, he revolutionized the way that college football was being handled as far as recruiting and those sorts of things.
Definitely.
So I think when I think about a dynasty, that's probably the closest thing I had to a dynasty in my head before what we have seen Nick do at Alabama. And so in my college football lifetime, and certainly in my career, because I was a working sports guy at that point in the early 2000s, and then through Nick's time at Alabama, those are the two that I would think of. And even with those two, I don't like to say dynasty. I just think that you're doing it at a level that everyone else is striving to achieve and hopes to be able to compete with, and if you measure anything that's going on in the sport, you measure it against that team at that time.
Right.
So, and as far as Georgia specifically is concerned, it all depends on when you want to count it. I mean, so you can tell me, but for this argument's sake, let's throw away 16 because that was the first year, right? So a coach's first year at a new job,
right?
They find their feet. Okay, 17, obviously, Alabama and Georgia play for the national title. 18, they're right there. 19, they're right there. 20 is weird. And then they win it in 21 and 22.
Right.
So over the stretch, I mean, if you look at the statistics as far as total wins and I just did a video on this right over the last 5 years. I used 5 years as the window. If you look at the last 5 years as something to sort of give you perspective, I would say that Georgia is the top program in college football right now, and they were the top team on the field the last 2 seasons. With that said, that's the kind of thing that's fluid. So if Alabama rolls out on the field this year, goes 15-0 and wins the national title, you could very, very easily flip-flop those two or put Kirby down at 3, depending on who Alabama beats. I mean, it's a very fluid sort of thing. But I do think you have to have some longevity there before you even consider the word dynasty.
I think you made a good point, because to that point, what you just said, it's funny because when a team wins a national championship, there's a lot of terms that are being thrown around. But the minute they don't win a national championship, people all of a sudden want to say, "Oh, the dynasty's over," or "their reign is over," or whatever the case. They're not. It's not going to happen again. Blah blah blah. It happens, and then 1 or 2 years surpasses, and they win another national championship, and then they start throwing their term around. So I just kind of wanted to get your take on that. So,
and to piggyback on that, Raj, I don't think the average person seems to understand what it takes to navigate a whole season, especially in college football. NFL, no disrespect to the game, but if you got a player taking a game off here or there, or you're not motivated for 1 or 2, whatever, you
can lose games in the NFL.
Playoffs, yeah. College, if you take a game off,
that's it.
Okay, that's it. The whole season's done.
Right.
Well, see, you guys have led us right into some murky waters here, because in 2024, obviously the playoff is coming. Right. And for someone like me, who is a traditionalist, I am not a huge fan of the playoff in its expanded form. So, because I do value, say, Georgia, Tennessee from last season. Right? Say Alabama, LSU from last season. Those games really matter to me, and especially because they're happening inside our conference. And if we look outside the conference, Michigan and Ohio State, right? That game matters because it determines who gets where. So I hope, I don't know, that's a bit of a different rabbit trail, and I don't know if y'all want to go down it.
Yeah, we were going to discuss playoffs, so maybe we're just kind of in a different order. But I say absolutely, let's
jump into it,
because that's where we went to. That was definitely on the docket to kind of. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, let's just take our personal thing. Last year, I don't think Alabama was a playoff team. Quite frankly, we lost the 2 most important games. Right. Now, do I think we would have given a better game than TCU? Of course, but wouldn't everybody have? At this point, I don't think that's the fair argument to make. I was not one of those saying that we should have got in over TCU, because the results have to matter at some point. You can't just say, well, if team A played team B, well, I could do that all day. So to get back to my point, I don't like the expanded, because you take last year, we lost the 2 most important games, and Alabama's still probably in the playoff, last year. I feel like they're not going to get the results that they're looking for, because you're going to end up seeing a lot of teams get squashed. I think they're still riding the whole Boise State over Oklahoma. No offense to Mike out there, if he's I know he probably doesn't want to relive that, but they're probably still reliving that and thinking what's going to happen. But I mean, let's just be honest. The top teams are still going to end up being the top teams. You're probably just putting more stress on the kids with more games. There's more chance of a Georgia guy getting hurt against, I don't know, Miami of Ohio in a random game versus like making it, you know what I mean? All the way. It's just they're throwing extra stuff out there.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. But once the playoff expands, like if it goes to a 12-team playoff, whatever the case may be, if you're that 12th team, you're going to look at your playoff bracket and say, "Hey, you might be a starting quarterback for University of Iowa, just hypothetically speaking," and you say, "Hey, I might be a 1st or 2nd round pick." I really don't feel like playing 2 or 3 games just to get to the final game, and especially if we have to play teams like Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, things like that. And you're just going to say, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and sit this one out. We'll see what happens. If we win 1 or 2 games, so be it. But we're probably not going to make it to the national championship anyway. So, I mean, for cases like that, you have your top 4. Let's just leave it with the top 4. Obviously, we want to do it for, I don't know, I guess more money, more viewers, etc. Get more teams in. And another thing is, you already have people that are 5 or 6 saying, "Hey, we should have been one of the top 4." What happens when you do the 12 teams? What happens to number 13? What happens to number 14? What happens to number 15? They're going to make the same case. Well, we should have been in the playoffs. Then what's going to happen 5 or 6 years? Are they going to expand it more? Is it going to be eventually like a big, March Madness type of football bracket where it's just absolutely, ridiculous? I don't know. That's just my opinion on it. So I feel like they should leave it the top four. To Hurt's point, I mean, at the end of the day, the top 4 teams are going to make it to the Final Four pretty much every year, with the exception of a few upsets every now and then.
Right. And there's Mike last year, real quick, just to show you. He thought Bama should have been. It's interesting that the Bama guy is saying no and the Oklahoma guy is saying yes.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of different points here. And I mentioned this on Mike's show too, because I'm on record in more than one place saying that I don't think that the Big 12 is ever going to win a college football national championship again.
Yeah.
I think that because of the way the money's distributed across the various conferences and the amount being so different between the various leagues, that at some point you get into that whole Malcolm Gladwell thing, right? Where one small advantage in the beginning snowballs and becomes a huge advantage 10 years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that it's really going to exacerbate the entire haves versus have-nots discussion. And that brings me to my second point around.
And Randy, would you throw the Pac-12 into that one too as well?
Well, who are they? Right now, I don't know who they are. But given the fact that they still don't have a media deal, right? And that if they can't make some serious headway very soon, then yeah, I think you kind of have to. As much as I love Oregon and what I believe Dan Lanning can do there, because I really do think he's taking a Southern football mindset out to the Pacific Northwest, and in terms of the type of player that he's recruiting and so on. I think that Oregon can really be a very good team out there. Still, though, if you took the very best squad they could produce, given they are the exception, right? Because they have the Phil Knight advantage. But I think any other team out there, maybe Washington, might be able to get on the field, but at the end of the day, I still think the teams that we all would think of as being, contenders year in and year out would have the advantage over those teams.
Yep.
So
I agree.
So to my second point there, I think what the 12-team playoff is doing is it's going to provide access, but it's not going to change the outcome. So at the end of the day, why are we providing access? Just to make people feel good? Just to make money? I mean, if it's you guys or if it's me, if you think people love college football now, wait until 2024, where you have an entire month of the college football playoff. The most casual of casuals is going to understand that something is happening and they are going to want to pay attention. So for people like us talking about this kind of thing, that's a really good thing, right? Because people are going to be interested. Also, for people like us who value the game, study the game, live the game, those people might drive us insane because they're not going to be understanding, right, who's actually going to win the game or why it matters or any of that. I've spent a lot of time over the last 6 months in discussions on various podcasts and places like this where
you've done other podcasts other than ours?
Oh my God. Oh man, I don't even know what to do. I thought it was just us, Randy.
Sorry, fellas. But in those conversations, there is a very, very deep group of people that are like Big 10 folks and Big 12 and Pac-12 people. And to hear them talk about it, this is a really good thing because they want to beat up on the SEC about our conference schedule and so on and so forth, and the way we game the system to get more players into the playoff ultimately and things like that. And I'm like, friends, it doesn't ultimately matter because if you end up getting in there, honestly, is your third best team, let's just say a Penn State maybe from last season out of the Big Ten, is that team gonna shock the world twice and make it to a national title game and then shock the world again and beat an Alabama or an LSU or Georgia or an Ohio State? You know what I mean? So I just think that there are only a handful of schools across the country that are currently making the investments necessary to truly compete for the college football playoff national championship. Yeah, I would probably cut it off at 8. You might be able to stretch it to 10. And I mean, in terms top to bottom, front to back, are you investing in the program in every way necessary? And do you then have the right people in place to get the job done? So like Ohio State is one of those teams, Georgia, Alabama, LSU is doing just fine. USC is trying to get there. There are schools that are doing it and have the capability, but the pool is not large. And when you take those 8 teams, throw them in that 12-team playoff, well, the other 4, what are they except cannon fodder? Could they pull an upset? Of course. The ball is shaped funny. It takes funny bounces. But to think that that team is then going to go win the national championship against these other 6 that we're talking about, I think it's a little silly, honestly.
Yeah.
So it's about television and it's about money. Yeah. With all that said, I'm a football guy. Put the games on. I want to watch them.
Yeah.
But I just don't think very much is going to change ultimately.
Yeah, and I agree.
By the way, real quick, one of our good buddies says that you forgot Michigan in this whole little part of the conversation when you mentioned Ohio State and not mention. So that's one of our good buddies, Mr. You caught his show this morning. Great stuff. I'm on a ladder actually doing and I told him I couldn't tune into his show because I'm working. I would come down from the ladder, pick up my phone, and comment on his show.
And they were that close to playing Georgia last year too. That close. So
my job took a lot longer thanks to his show this morning. Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah.
No disrespect intended there. I just picked one. They both clicked through my brain, and I just picked Ohio State because that's who we played. So that's how that went down. So no disrespect intended. As far as Michigan is concerned, I think that as we go into this season, I would probably put. And I don't know who I'm going to upset more, our friend in the chat there or you guys, but I could very easily put Michigan at number 2 and put Alabama at number 3. So and
who's number 1?
Well, I think it has to be Georgia.
I know. I just like,
right.
I don't even know that's an argument.
I was just joking. Yeah.
Believe it or not, now there are people. Again, I told you I've been in these places where people are adamant that Michigan should be number 1 going into the preseason, simply because of that whole very misleading, in my opinion, returning production metric.
Yeah.
So I get it. So if you want to make the argument, that's fine, but I wouldn't stand on the table for it, if you know what I mean. So, and the thing also to that point, and again, I'm just sort of knocking off a bunch of things here, but it's not the reason I say Georgia, just to clarify, is because if you look at Alabama and Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, that's easily a top 4. I think that's fairly consensus. If you look at those teams, they all have questions. I just personally feel that Georgia's answers are easier attained than the answers for those other schools based on what I know. Now, I could just not know enough, and you guys might be able to tell me what Alabama's quarterback situation is going to look like, right? You might be able to tell me if you're going to have an explosive wide receiver.
Call us after Texas.
Sure. I feel like we have all as far as wide receivers, running back, defense, secondary, etc. We have the right players there. But to answer your question, as far as the quarterback situation is concerned, we have no idea. No. We thought that we were going to get some answers out of the spring game, but we didn't really receive any answers then.
We got
more questions. Obviously, Milroe is the most athletic out of the quarterbacks, and I think I hear he's like the fastest guy on the team, but he's still drawing some blanks for me. I just don't know if he's the right guy. I personally like Ty Simpson, but he didn't look. He looked a little rocky during the spring game as well. So I think
he got hurt during the spring game.
And he got hurt. I think I want to say he's healed by now, but he did get hurt during the spring game. So over this next month and a half or so, we're gonna hopefully we kind of narrow it down.
And then we brought in the Notre Dame kid, which
I forgot about.
I was against. The 100%, and nothing against him or his tape, but I felt like they could have worked with what we had and developed one of those guys. I feel like last year was not a good developmental year for Milroe at all.
Right.
I don't think they used him correctly, and I think, to be honest, Alabama fans still hold the Texas A&M game against him, and it's been an uphill. Like Bryce Young was quite, arguably the best quarterback we've had here. Yeah. That's saying a lot. And you're asking the next guy to step in, and with a coordinator that nobody seemed to like was who Milroe came up with. I don't feel like he's gotten a fair shake as far as things have gone. Yeah. And now you throw a guy in late, that just, I don't know, muddied the waters for me.
And we really go ahead. And I'm sorry to interrupt you. And we really have one game to really kind of figure this out. We open up with Middle Tennessee, so I mean, even with bad quarterback play in that game, we could still win by a few touchdowns. And then obviously week 2 we host Texas.
Yeah.
And I'll admit this. Quinn Ewers is probably better than the quarterbacks that we have in our quarterback room right now. And
we would take either one of their two. So
we would take either one of them two. And so if we really don't have a certified quarterback by game 2, that second game in Tuscaloosa against the Texans is going to look pretty rough.
Pretty rough, yeah. And to the other point that we were making about top 25. Raj and I said this last year. Georgia should have been number 1 the full year anyway. We were saying that when Alabama was number 1. I think Tennessee was number 1. I don't kind of get into this losing production, returning, like all that kind of stuff. They won the national championship and didn't seem like there was going to be a drop off. You start the year at number 1. Like I don't understand the whole. I've seen them at practice. I'm blah 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 whatever. Like I don't get into that whole thing. Raj and I said this. Like, and probably go back and listen to podcasts. We felt Georgia should have been number 1 to start the year. They didn't do anything during the whole year to lose number 1. It's just like, and I think they were in the position I would have loved to be in. Like the disrespect was real. So, it just kind of helps as a healthy motivator every week. So.
Yeah. And so, all right, I'll go with my first question originally and maybe come back to that part. But so from the outside looking in, it appeared to me that maybe Ty Simpson was the guy that the staff wanted to take the job, but the turnovers were a problem. Right. So I think that Buckner coming in isn't necessarily a death knell for those other two. Agreed. I think it just provides a little more depth and competition. With that said, do you think that the staff, given your new coordinators, are more likely to shift the game plan to take advantage of what Milroe can do in the run game and play to his strengths? 1,000%. Or do you think they're going to ask him to be in the pocket and really try to push the ball down the field the way you've done the last 5 or 6 years?
So that's what they tried to do in the Texas A&M game, and it failed miserably. I was shocked that there was no design. Like, you take a kid like that, the very first series should be some design runs. Let's get his feet up under him. Maybe if you don't even have to throw and you score a touchdown, that's great. But get him into the flow of the game. I felt like that was 100% ignored for Milroe. And you know how those guys are when they come from being athletic and in college, in high school to college, their first instinct is always, I think I can run out of this. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, and I think that's kind of what he was. So he's dropping back. He's kind of get him into the flow of the game. I think having a younger coordinator like we do now will definitely take more advantage of that. But I also think the line and running game and even receivers are going to be better this year, to where the quarterback is not going to have to do as much as Bryce. Bryce did as much with little as what I've seen. From an Alabama team. And I think the pieces around whoever the quarterback are going to be better, to where we're not going to be trying to Lane Kiffin it up with, trying to hit 40 and 50 every week. So I think that's going to be a major thing as far as that goes. So, I definitely think the coordinators will help. And to your other point about, it's still a competition. Nobody transferred, which they still had up until that Sunday. We were all watching the ticker up until
right.
The players also must feel that it's an open competition as well. And real quick, Aaron, I want to just show you a couple of the comments because you are getting a lot. So I think I showed you the blue and the you saw this one, the winningest football team in history. Don't forget them. But he does also say nothing but love, Randy. Appreciate what you're doing on there. Hoda, one of our longtime listeners, did you miss Michigan talk? Even though you can't spell it right now. No, there's no Michigan. You didn't miss anything yet. We'll talk about them in a little bit. Mike wants to see Michigan and Norman. So Michigan has somehow taken over the Georgia-Alabama podcast somehow. So
that is what happens every time I'm in a room. It always devolves into Michigan State. And that's part of the reason that I started, I decided I'm absolutely going to go whole hog on my channel, because I know that there are people who need SEC talk, SEC-centric discussion. So that's what we try to do, with obviously a bent towards the University of Georgia. So I think we're doing the world's work out here, man. I think we are pushing back against the overtake of the Big Ten podcast world.
We're trying our best. Yeah. And Mike also says, please beat Texas. We're going to give it our best shot, but that's not a game that I feel like very confident about right now. I think defensively will be better than last year for sure. Although, it's not like they went up and down the field, especially after Ewers got hurt. But I think defensively will be better, run game will be better, but quarterback, huge question mark. Yeah. And you guys mentioned this, and I did look at 2 different top 10s before we got in there. Phil Steele released his. He had Alabama at 4. ESPN's last one that I saw had Alabama at 6. I feel like 6 is maybe a little bit more of a fair ranking than 4, given what we don't know. But I'll let you guys kind of roll with it. And I know, Randy, you had some other stuff you were trying to get into too as well.
Well, not really. It's I mean, my mind just go. We head down one road and it pings off to something else. And there we go. So, I was thinking when you were talking about Texas, I was going to make the point that, well, at least Alabama has the toughest, well, it looks that your toughest games are in Tuscaloosa, right? So Mississippi, Tennessee, Texas, all those, LSU, all those games are in Tuscaloosa. So
we do go to Texas A&M. I think that's like maybe the worst just because of how we do on the road, but you're 100% correct. Yeah, the other ones are at least at home, which I expect better for.
And the other part of that is like, and this is a running joke with me and the people who follow my work, is since I launched the channel in February, I've been going back and forth on who I think is actually going to win the West. And I always say it depends on the week. So this week, today, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I'm feeling Alabama for winning the West based on what I just said, right? Like the home games and that sort of stuff, just the overall depth of talent, because my inclination is that if I believe that Saban will not play a quarterback that's going to turn the ball over. Correct. So if Simpson doesn't fix that, then he's not going to get the snaps. I think that Milroe, I think there's a greater possibility that they would adapt the play calling to his skill set than turn it over to Buckner just because he showed up on campus as the guy that Reese knows. Yeah, so based on all that, and again, this is me, looking in from the outside, based on all of that, given the home schedule this week, I'm picking Alabama to win the West. Now talk to me again next week, and who knows what I'm going to vote at media days. I don't know what I'm going to put down for who I think is going to win the West, but today I'm picking Alabama to win the West. And I think you guys are stressing over the Texas game. I know Texas is supposed to be better, and I know that they added some pieces and so on and so forth. But I believe that home field advantage and the complementary game that I know Nick is going to play against Texas at home, I feel confident that Alabama is going to win that game. So, if that helps you guys feel any better about it, there you go. But that's my
we're not the feeling better type of people.
I feel like with those things said, we could win. It's a game we could not easily win, but it's a game we can win. But if we play as bad as we did last year in Austin, it's going to be a rough night for us. Then, because Herb and I were actually at that game last year in Austin, and it was horrible. We did not play well. Luckily, Bryce kind of pulled us out of that one. We won by, I think, a point or something. It was rough.
So let's get real here for a second. Let's put the spotlight on Alabama and get real, because when I think about that game, the thing I think about is a lack of discipline. Definitely. I think about the fact that you had guys that obviously 15, 18 penalties, something like that, some crazy
number. That was
number.
like our average.
It was like
last year.
Yeah, it was a ridiculous. And it started from I want to say it was the very first play of the game and just went throughout the entire game. Just penalty,
Will Anderson, one of our best players, continuously offsides. I mean, it was everything. And let's also be honest, Texas created the best atmosphere possible. The 11 o'clock game, it was super hot, putting all our crowd way up in the sky, affecting the game at all. And a lot of the players said it was loud as possible, but no, 1,000%. The Texas game was a microcosm of the whole year. Penalties.
And following up on that, I was reviewing some notes just for this conversation, and I didn't realize that on defense, Alabama allowed like 130 yards a game last year, which at first, when I hear that, I'm like, that kind of shocks me that number's that high. So I'm just curious how you guys feel. Do you think, and just this week, what was it? The kid who transferred to Colorado made that shots fired statement about how technique is taught better at Colorado than at Alabama. Yeah. So I guess I'm just asking, do you think that there's some insidious sort of issues inside your program in terms of discipline and toughness when it comes to the run game and things like that? I mean, just real talk. Do you think that's a thing, or do you think it was somehow an aberration? Because even Saban said last year that he didn't hear his guys in the tunnel before the game acting the way they usually act. And I had two thoughts. One, I'm like, well, why didn't you fix it? And two, you're the head coach, right? Aren't you responsible to a certain degree for that? So I don't know. I have some murky feelings about that, and I'm not trying to cast any sort of bad juju on them or anything. I'm curious if you guys can say anything to it to add a little flavor that I don't have.
Not necessarily that you don't have, but I feel like that was one reason why both coordinators were going to be gone for sure. Bill O'Brien, I don't think. Sometimes I think when you get a guy, an NFL guy to college, they don't really expect some of that stuff, and it was clear that he was just kind of on his own page. I think when he was here, he designed a playbook, and he used to brag that he had different playbooks for everybody, but it was clear he had one playbook and he was running certain things and expecting Bryce. So I felt like there was a huge disconnect there. And defensively, you could just tell we just weren't physical. We were in the wrong places a lot.
Yeah.
And, I don't feel like the coaching staff the last couple of years. I mean, because we had two of the best players Alabama's ever had. And, look at the way I don't mind, if we're going to lose 2 games this season, obviously that's, real world problems here. Like that's crazy to talk about, but it's the way that we were losing. You could tell that it was just bad. And I think that's why you saw some of the transfers, that they weren't worried about some of these people that transferred. And let's be honest, a couple of the transfers already been kicked off other teams already. So you've seen that kind of situation the past 2 years, but I understand a lot of it will go back to Nick, but I think his 2 head coordinators being gone and us not worrying about it and getting back to physical football, I think that was a huge thing in the last.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the one game, sorry to interrupt you, Randy. The one game that comes to mind is probably the Tennessee game from last year. It was obviously it was a complete shootout, but I believe his name was Jalen Hyatt catch for, I want to say he had over 200 receiving yards.
Five touchdowns. I was trying to forget that, Raj, but go ahead and bring up any other.
If I can recall, Herb and I were calling each other either throughout the game or at halftime, like, why is this same guy just destroying us? Why can't we pick up on this? Isn't there anything we can do? At this point, I'm okay with us even getting a penalty, just holding him or something.
Yeah, tackle,
but I could not figure it out because that just wasn't, I guess to your question, that just wasn't Alabama football. That's not the standard of football that we're used to seeing, at the University of Alabama. So I do think that there's some interesting things going on behind the scenes. And I'm hoping, to Herb's point, that this coaching change and the coaching kind of shakeup that we just recently experienced is going to change things and kind of get us back into that defense that we had 2015, 2016, when we had, Jonathan Allen and those guys back there. And then the defense was an absolute nightmare. So we're hoping that this is that turnaround year and we can get back to that year so we can. Well, keep our fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
So, okay, you guys flat out asked me, do I think Georgia is a dynasty? So my question to you would be, as someone who has ruled college football for 10 years, 15 years, do you think that the dynasty of Alabama is crumbling? Because look at the reality on the field. 1 title in 5 seasons doesn't sound like a dynasty. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that they're not a fantastic program.
Right.
But I'm just curious how y'all feel about it.
I don't think it's necessarily crumbling, but we are getting hit by a few rocks here and there, and we're starting to feel it a little bit, if that's a good metaphor or not. But to your point, it's just like we're so used to being on top, and then if we're mentioned in the top 4, top 5 pretty much every season, I think we're still up there. But again, to Alabama standard, we have to win national championships throughout every once in a while to kind of remain, in our eyes, somewhat relevant. So I think it's not necessarily crumbling yet, but this is going to be a nice little deciding year coming up.
Yeah. I'll also say this, and I don't know if this is accurate or true, but I feel like Alabama was the slowest to react to the kids' reactions to NIL stuff. I think we were still getting the talent, but you could just tell the attitude since NIL came in here is you just feel like certain guys weren't working as hard as maybe they did in the past. And I just have to wonder if there's a correlation to it, and I can't fully blame them because obviously other programs have navigated it well and still kept a high standard, but the standard that we built has not been the same. The fact that like I said, Bryce and Will, you have 2 top 3 guys on your team and you make one national championship. But then again, there's other things that go like how did we only, how we navigate a whole year with 2 viable wide receivers? It's other things. Like I said, I still go back to the coordinators. So this is kind of, I hate to say it, like a make or break year because the recruiting classes are still coming in, and I think you're going to be talking about a top 10 Alabama for a while. But it does kind of feel more like, I think we wouldn't be talking about this also though if Georgia hadn't won back to back. If Georgia doesn't win last year and one of the other teams wins, and then we're like, would we be talking about them crumbling? No, but I think it's the fact that another SEC team is coming up while Alabama's not winning. I think that's what really kind of gets it. If Ohio State had won the last 2, they'd be talking as the SEC crumbling, not Alabama. Yeah. So by the way, of course, Mike, I don't want to put this comment up here, but Alabama Kingdom is falling. Georgia.
Yeah, I saw that.
Better to not put this up here, but I got to be fair to everybody.
Touche.
Well, and again, I'm not trying to needle you guys. I really am trying to get some perspective because it's one of those things that, again, I have a baseline assumption for what Alabama's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at it, I'm like, all the discipline of the penalties and that sort of stuff speaks to something to me. Right. And so I like Bryce, you mentioned him a couple different times. Bryce made that squad last year.
Definitely.
I mean, there would have been 4 losses. Maybe 5, very possibly. So that's the kind of player that he was. And so when I look at Alabama, I'm like, wow, man, that is, what are we doing? So
even the LSU game when Jaden Daniels ran that ball in overtime, I could have sworn every single person watching that game kind of knew that he was going to run the ball in. Yeah. I don't think he was going to take a chance at passing, and he just tried it on the end, just easily untouched and everything. And I was just sitting there wondering, how did we not? I never played college football, but I knew that was going to happen. And how did we not pick that up? So it was just little plays like that. And again, I've already mentioned the Tennessee game that just made me just kind of rub my head and just figure out what's going on right now and what needs to be changed and when are we going to kind of change.
Right. And to your point, Randy, we noticed. Like I said, let's say the year Georgia beat us in the championship, we had 2 decent wide receivers and Bryce, and that was. That didn't make any sense to me, but it just seemed like Bill O'Brien was like, let me just call up a play and just see what Bryce can do. Yeah. And that's what you got. Yeah. If you have another quarterback in, I was at one of the games where we were blowing somebody out and Bryce missed a throw and the guy behind me was like, oh, Mac Jones would have made that throw. And I was thinking Mac Jones would have gotten killed the last 2 years. I don't know what you're thinking, but I have nothing but love and respect for Bryce. And I feel like we definitely wasted his talent.
Yeah.
Well, believe me, hearing you guys talk like this, it hits different, right? Because now that Georgia's had the success that they have, I look at what Kirby's doing around the program, and as a fan, what I'm looking at, and I see the things that they're trying to do to prevent the complacency, right? To push away that sort of stuff that creeps in just because you're doing so well. And it's extremely difficult to do. I mean, forget winning a national title, right? Just winning the conference is such a huge thing when you have teams like LSU and Alabama on the other side. Auburn traditionally on the other side, that's quite the feat to win the conference. So I know that I'm happy as a dog right now, but I also understand, where we live. I know the rent is high, and I know that the margin of error is very small.
Very little.
So, as much as I would like to say, yes, Georgia's going to go 12-0 and make the playoff, you're just never going to hear me say that because I respect the game too much. I respect the work that the coaches and the players do too much to just write out 12-0 and think it just happens, right? They have to go play these games, and they give it everything they have all year round. And as a fan and an alumnus of the university, I am thankful that these young men are willing to go do that kind of work. And that provides me with a point of pride as an alumnus, right? To be able to say, look at my university. Not only are we winning on the field, but the University of Georgia, is a wonderful academic institution and so on and so forth. And so I'm proud in that respect too. It's not just wins and losses. I'm proud of all those things. And I'm assuming that you guys feel the same way about your university.
Oh, we do. Raj and I were actually, we're not homegrown Alabama fans. Our dad was in the Army, and we moved to Tuscaloosa in 94.
Yep.
So that was his last post. He was teaching ROTC University. I want to say he said he could have gone to Alabama, Kentucky, or somewhere else. And I don't even know if it was University of Kentucky. It just was somewhere in Kentucky. Somehow he picked Tuscaloosa, and we're having to look at a map and figure out where Tuscaloosa.
Yeah,
keep in mind, 94. It's like you're not looking up anything on the internet. You're not
right.
We're looking it up. People are like telling us about Alabama. It's the South. You know, blah blah blah. We have no idea what we're getting into. And I think our high school at that time was huge. They were actually playing the rival high school in Bryant-Denny Stadium. You know, that's how big, you know, football is. Obviously, you know, so that's how but the other thing that made us was very humble about football because we started in 94. The championship was 92. We had no idea what these people were talking about, how great Alabama was.
Right.
We saw some 20 coaches come through and one coach not even make it to a game before he was gone. I mean,
we remember those Mike Price, Shula, Dulos. We remember all those years.
You know, we remember a lot of so that's why I don't think we're as much as the typical Alabama fan. So we're still, obviously we want to win championships, but we're still enjoying the whole experience, you know, still looking forward to everything. And you know how many teams would love to say, hey, our team lost 4 games in the last 2 years, one of those being in the national championship game.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, you know, Michigan, Ohio State have already been in there. Michigan would love to say they've been in a national championship in the last, you know, couple years. So if Mr. U is still out there, kudos to him. And even Mike, I guess he's talking about with his don't feel too bad. Like Oklahoma would trade spots, you know, right now with where Alabama is. So we're talking about all this kind of stuff and issues, but I mean, there's a lot of people who are laughing at us complaining about where Alabama sits right now. You know, they're like, we're a bunch of whiners, probably.
It's just part of the emotions of being a college football fan.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
that is exactly right. And I, again, you will not catch me taking it for granted. That's all I'm going to say about that. I mean, you know, for gosh, all of the 90s when I was at Georgia, I was at Georgia 94 to 98. So in that window, it was Tennessee and Florida ruling the roost in the conference, right? Even up through the early part of the 2000s, it was Florida. So the fact that Alabama, you know, were able to turn it around when Nick got there. I mean, obviously you have to give credit where credit's due, but I don't want to be that fan who forgets everything that happened before the good stuff. You know what I mean? I want to remember that because, and that sort of circles us back around to what the playoff means, because I just think that there are a lot of teams. If you put, okay, we can get into this if you guys want to, but like we were discussing before the show about, you know, what is Georgia doing? And I think you used the phrase Georgia's dominance, you know, and so we can get into what that is and why it's happening. But I think that when you're looking at the 12-team playoff in particular in 24, people are going to have to get back to the idea that football, college football, is the greatest sport on the planet for a reason. And it's because of, in my view, the regionality and all of the emotion that's attached to it, whether you're an alumnus like myself or whether you're raised up in it like you were. It's one of those things where it just means more, like the thing says, right? So if it means more, if that's true, then winning 10 games and beating Auburn and winning a Sugar Bowl that may not be the national championship game is a hell of a season, right? Because it just is. But if you're only going to take the national championship as a good season, then all of us are just going to be miserable little dudes running around here for the next, you know, however long. I mean, you have to be able to keep it in perspective, in my opinion. Now, with that said, now that the college football playoff is here, and especially from a Georgia point of view, over the last couple of years, the fact that they've been able to do what they've been able to do, right? 29-1, back-to-back titles in an era of the transfer portal, NIL, and the college football playoff. Those three things right there, we could just stop and say, that's pretty doggone impressive. I would hope that a college football fan, period, could just look at that and go, yep, that's pretty impressive. Now, you know, we can nitpick whatever you want, but I just think that to be able to do that is, and again, there's a certain amount of luck in there, you know, but at the same time, Georgia has had their own issues with changing quarterbacks, with injuries at key positions throughout each of these last 2 title runs, and they've still managed to do it.
Right.
So, again, I just think that, forget the fact that I'm a Georgia fan, I think that's just an impressive thing. Just like I think Alabama going undefeated in the COVID year in an all-conference schedule is an extremely impressive feat, both because of what was happening off the field and because of the fact that you didn't have those pay-for-play games. You only had the conference, and then you had to go beat the best that the other conferences had to offer. So I'm someone who values that performance in 2020, at a higher level than some people do, because they discount it because of what it was. I don't do that. So anyway,
and I still think the best teams shook out in the end too. That was just like any other year. So, Randy, we're kind of running up against. I guess we got about 10 minutes left. So I did want to get. We did prep you with one question. So we usually make this Raj's top 5 list, but today it'll be Randy's. Your top 5 favorite players under the Kirby Smart era, and this kind of comes off the Raj. Was it a week or 2 ago? Raj gave his top 5 favorite players
last week.
Under
the Nick Saban era.
Nick Saban era. So this leads perfectly into that. And just to clarify, for anybody who's listening, this is not based necessarily on production. The NFL does not factor into this. This is Randy's personal favorite for whatever criteria that he put, or no criteria. Just, hey, I like that guy's name. Whatever came up for you. Top 5 under the Kirby Smart era.
Okay, I think I can get through these pretty quick because you did give me a little lead time, which I really appreciate. Because as I did it, this turned out to be a lot harder than I thought it might be.
That's why the only question we prep every week is the top 5 list, because we don't want you on the top of the air going on.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there, and I appreciate it. So I'm going to do this in no particular order, but I do have a little something to say about each of them. So to begin, and you guys get to call the shot here, I'm going to start with Nick Chubb.
Right.
Because Nick is a monster, right? Yes. Like that dude's just a monster. But I really wanted to sort of tie Sony Michel to him because one of the watershed moments in Kirby's era was when Nick and Sony said they were coming back for their senior year in 2017. Right. It just changed the trajectory of the program. That decision was huge for so many reasons. So if I can only take one, I'm going to take Nick. And again, that's just based on what he did in college. But just know that I would love to bundle he and Sony together because of what they meant to the program and to, again, the trajectory and where we've gone since then. So Nick Chubb has to start the list for me. Gotcha. The next one's going to be really easy. I'm just going to get it out of the way, and it has to be Stetson Bennett. And I will say that with a caveat that Stetson Bennett was a guy that in 2020, before the Dogs came to play Alabama, I was asked, can he get it done in Tuscaloosa? I said, I don't think so. The team is good enough to win. I don't trust Stetson Bennett to win the game for us. And in the second half, he made the errors that led to, or at least made it more difficult for us to overcome the direction of that game, and they lost that game. I went from being that guy who said that about Stetson Bennett to, by the time we hit the playoff last season, I was saying if Stetson Bennett plays, Georgia wins, period. So he absolutely won me over. I don't know, I guess I was wrong to make the judgment I did about him, even though he did what I thought he was going to do. I want to give the kid credit, right? I want to give him credit for doing the thing to earn that position for me. So Stetson Bennett's number 2. Good on him. Roquan Smith is an absolute creature. Yeah. He was a creature at Georgia. He was one of those dudes that changed the way Georgia thinks about not only defense, but also the middle linebacker position at the University of Georgia. And obviously he's gone on to do great things in the league, but that doesn't, impact this. But Roquan, it would just had that killer mentality and was a phenomenal player and a really good dude. And I loved Roquan Smith at Georgia. From this last year's team, I can't get past Jalen Carter and just the athlete and the player that he is. the way, I mean, literally the dude can like teleport from one gap to the next. He can destroy an offensive line. You have to game plan for him. Being an old defensive lineman, he's a joy to watch play the game. Just the violence with which he plays the game is something that's beautiful to behold. So Jalen Carter's on this list for me. And I'll wrap it up with the current like unbelievable thing that's going on at the University of Georgia, which is Brock Bowers. And
I was wondering if he would make this.
I know.
He is like, sorry, there's not as many times I'm going to be in awe of another team's play.
Yes,
let's just be honest, right? And especially not and I'm going to put tight end in quotes because I feel like, and to go to the points that we made earlier, I love what the Georgia coaching staff has decided. They said, look, Brock needs X amount of touches a game. If we're not getting them in the passing game, we're going to get them somehow. I felt like that's something we didn't do with Gibbs last year. Get him more touches, like however you had to. So sorry, I hate to interrupt, but he would be one of those like dark horse Heisman favorites because Randy, the dude is just a beast. And I have been trying to figure out a way to get him disqualified for the year, and we've been unsuccessful. But if he gets caught with some illegal amount of drugs or for something,
we don't know where it came from.
Yeah, we don't know where it came from.
Randy, I can't tell you how many times I asked Herb how we can get him to transfer to Bama. I can't. I don't know how to do it. I don't know if I need to DM him on Instagram or what. Maybe it's too late. But hey, man, Brock Bowers, if you're listening, we can all admit here we all love you. You're the best tight end in college football, and you have been for like the past 2 or 3 years.
Yes.
First round pick by far.
Yes. Sorry, Randy. I hate to jump you on that one, but go ahead. I'm sorry, man.
Hey, Brock deserves that sort of attention. Yeah. And that's part of where I'm going on with this is he's a guy that's not only changed the way the tight end is being used in modern college football, but nobody's going to outwork that dude. And what makes me just so happy is that he is just a phenomenal person, right? The thing, and you don't have to dig hard to find that he's doing wonderful things. And he's a fantastic ambassador for the university. He's a tremendous football player, and he's an even better individual. And so Brock Bowers is just, I am pleased to say that he makes my list. And I know this is a Bama stream, but if you would like to know more about Bowers, my last video, well, not my last video, but the one before was dedicated to Brock and who he is and what he could do this year and the things that are in front of him, you know, as a collegiate player. So if you care about that at all, go check that video out because Brock is.
I want to know as little about him as possible. I wish him well in the NFL.
He's going to be a great NFL player. Yeah, he's got all the skills. He's fast too. He's really fast. I don't know what his 40 time is, but he's got the size. What's he 6'4", 240, 245, something like that. And he's extremely fast. I just wish he was at Bama, but
he's a low 4.5 guy. So just a tick over 4.5. So
gotcha.
But you know, whether people want to admit it or not, Stetson wound up being a 4.5 guy. But the thing is, Brock is the most deceptive because of his height, his stride is so long. That's part of what makes him, you know, so fast is he messes up the angles. People watch him and they're like, I got that dude, but then that stride stretches out and you know he gets away from them. So
gotcha.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
All right, Rod, you want to get into the 3 questions of death real quick?
All right, yeah. So every segment we have, every week, Herb and I ask each other either he'll ask me the 3 questions or I ask Herb the 3 questions of death. So here we go with Randy. This is a pretty fun one. Let's just say the University of Georgia receives a letter and they're no longer able to use the Bulldogs name. They have to change to another dog, but you cannot choose Pit Bull. What is the new name for the University of Georgia? You cannot choose Pit Bull. No more Bulldogs. What are you going to be? Is it going to be Kirby Smart and the Georgia Great Danes? What is it going to be?
Man, you had to limit me to dogs. I'll tell you what I was going to do.
David's trying to help you out
dogs. Here. Yeah, no, dogs seems to make it tougher, but I would go with
David says poodles. I don't think he likes that.
I don't know. Poodles doesn't really sound very menacing.
I'm gonna go with shepherds. Okay.
But I can see that.
I'm sure there's some sort of like slang term around shepherd that probably sounds more fierce, but
Yeah.
it would be like a shepherd.
You'll be
kind of
making
Georgia
it up,
Shepherds.
that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
All
That's
right.
that's a good one. I like that answer.
All right, number 2. Oh well, Dave. There's a better answer. Canines. I like that
Canines.
one better too than
Yeah.
poodles. So thank you, David. Number 2,
Can we
Georgia.
just say barkers? I'm just saying.
I feel like you'd be playing with that for the whole next year. Every game would be a different mascot until you landed on the one that you wanted. All right, number 2. Georgia closes up shop. There is no more University of Georgia. So this is a 2-part question.
Oh,
okay.
wow.
1, who would be your SEC team that you would have to give your loyalty to for the rest? Like everything you do for Georgia would go to that. And number 2, who is your non-SEC team that you would? And when I say give your loyalty, you're moving to this place, you are supporting that school the way you do Georgia, like everything. And you know who we're talking about. Roll Tide, roll.
Okay. This is so easy. Yeah, it's shocking how easy this is.
Okay.
Because I'm a college football fan, right? I'm not just a Georgia fan. Right. So if it had to be inside the conference, that team would be the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Wow.
Because my dad used to like Arkansas, and so growing up and watching games, we would always pay attention to the Arkansas Razorbacks, and I just always have had a soft spot for the Razorbacks. So it would be the Razorback, and Arkansas is a beautiful state, so I could handle that. I could make it work. If it were not inside the SEC, my answer is the Wyoming Cowboys.
Wow.
You just disappointed Mike.
He wanted you to come to North.
When the games go off on Saturdays, I am always hoping that the Cowboys are playing in that 10 p.m. window somewhere, and I can check out the Wyoming Cowboys. And if I'm lucky, they're playing in Laramie and it's snowing, and we've got somebody halfway decent opposing them. Something about that Cowboy, just everything about it, I just enjoy it, and I would love to say I called Wyoming home too. I think that would be cool. So yeah, it would be Arkansas and Wyoming.
I was not expecting Wyoming, but I like that
threw
answer.
me for that one. Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Shout out to Josh Allen.
The last question, number 3, which is sometimes the toughest question. Yes. So who was your favorite, Herb or Raj?
Okay, now see, we squared this up earlier, and I had to make sure I knew who I was talking about.
Come on, Randy.
So I thank you both so very much for the invitation to be on the show. You've been wonderful hosts, but just for this answer, I'm going to have to go with Raj, because I keep looking at his hat and I'm trying to figure out what in the world's going on there. 205 is that the area code? Is that what's going on there?
Yeah, that's the area code for like Tuscaloosa, Birmingham. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Well, Randy, having you on the show, we'll never do this again.
Thank you so much, Randy.
In like 10, we've probably done that question 10 times. Raj is 2-0-8.
David just chimed in. He's Team Herb, so.
It's all about the fit. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. That's a good answer. Real quick, the stuff with Jeremiah had tuned in earlier, so he gave us a good thumbs up. We didn't get to this, and this was my fault. I forgot about this at the very beginning. I meant to throw this out. The Pat Fitzgerald. That's shocking news. And everything you hear about that situation was just, it sounds worse and worse. And obviously I didn't play football at any great level, but the things that they were talking in there would not make me want to be a better teammate. So that's, I don't totally get that whole situation.
It's pretty messed up. And Pat Fitzgerald's one of those guys that you wouldn't have thought something like that might be going on.
Agreed.
He's that kind of guy.
Yeah. Or at a Northwestern for that matter,
Yeah.
Right. But the other part of that is I mentioned a couple of times that I've spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people in the Big Ten over the last 6 months, and everyone is asking the same question, which is, we know Northwestern's not good, but what is happening there? Something's happening, and no one really knew what it was. And maybe what we're learning about right now had, the lion's share of what's going on there being the problem at Northwestern. And the fact that it's, one of the local school newspapers is doing some really good reporting on that too. So the sports journalist in me is sort of proud of that little unit doing a good job covering that topic the way it should be covered, right? They're just worried about exposing what's going on, because that's I mean, it should be exposed.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to touch on that more, but again, it is kind of a breaking situation too, so I'm sure everybody will cover it more as weeks go. This was Mike's championship game prediction for next year. So
OU versus Georgia.
Yep.
In 24. In 24.
Oh wow!
All right. Well,
and you
well,
know, it's funny because you kind of touched on this earlier, how we kind of set up our topics and go. We didn't even talk about OU and Texas getting into the conference just because of the way the conversation flowed. So, but to me, that shows that we had fun, Randy. So we definitely.
Oh yeah, we love it.
Well, I was going to say, you guys didn't know what you were getting into, man. I can bump my gums with the best of them. So I get us started and you know, oh, I'm sorry. I'd click the mute button. I have to mute myself, but you guys didn't know what you were getting into, because I can talk with the best of them. So I took us and ran with it. But
we enjoyed it, man. We enjoyed it. So
I think I just mute or unmute? I've confused myself. Can you hear me?
You're
now?
good. We can still hear you.
Yeah,
we didn't miss any of that. So
yeah,
I'm gonna just show you a couple of the other ones. Like you said, Mike said Raj for the win. David wants to come on the show. We'll see what we can do. But Dave, you can't insult LeBron the whole show.
I know.
His first comment today was a LeBron insult. I'll at least give you that one, and then some choice words. So, and I think there was one more. David is on my side, and Mike says Raj for the win. But when Mike was on the show, Mike was one of those ties who didn't vote.
Most people go for the tie.
Mike can't say that. So anyway, we did run over a little bit, but Randy, we definitely appreciate you on there. Obviously, you're the bigger name here, but tell everybody where to check you out at.
Yeah, you can find us at A Damn Beast across all the social media, with the exception of Instagram. For some reason, I had to tag media on the end of that one. But at A Damn Beast will find me. And if you just punch that into the Google, you should be able to find the website, and that'll lead you to everything else. But here on YouTube especially, it is at A Damn Beast. And every Wednesday, we're live at 7 p.m. for On a Swivel. So if you want to know more about what's going on with the dogs, check us out 7 p.m. on Wednesdays. We will be talking all dogs all the time, what happened in the last week and what's coming up in the next week.
Awesome.
Appreciate you
coming on.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Herb and Raj podcast. Thank you everybody that left comments. I apologize if I missed them. I did try to post up, except for the mean ones. There was a couple mean Georgia ones in there. Some David mentioned how old Stetson Bennett was, so I at least throw that out to you. But try to avoid most of those to keep the show clean.
Well, I mean, he's the same age as Stetson, or same age as Hendon Hooker. And I mean, goodness, who's going to hold it against the young fella for taking advantage of every rule that he could take advantage of to play the game of college football?
I'm winning national championships and probably don't have to pay for a single thing in Georgia. Life is good. Stetson Bennett, so life was probably really, really good.
Right. Right.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you everybody for listening. Or if you're listening on the rebroadcast, and we will be back. I'll be at the beach, but we'll probably still be here next week. 7 o'clock live. Randy will definitely try and get you back on, or not try. We'd love to have you back on here. The conversation was fun.
Definitely.
Maybe when we fully break down the conference, and maybe we'll actually get through all of our topics. But I look forward to these days when we don't. Raj and I do this every week. We write a whole page of notes and then don't get.
We barely get through any of them.
So we consider that a good show, man. So thank you very much.
Hey, you're quite welcome. Thanks again for having me on, and go dogs.
Well, we can't end on that note. So thank you for the Herb and Raj, for listening to the Herb and Raj podcast. And as always, roll tide.